He didn't say a damn word, just looked down at the memo Monica slid across the table, all smug in her oversized glasses like she'd just handed down some divine ruling from the mountaintop. Your bonus has been denied. It read, underlined twice like they were proud of it. No numbers, no KPIs, no actual reason, just one phrase in bold, attitude issue, team cohesion concerns. He read it once, then again. I watched his hand move, slow, precise, picking up the pen like he'd done this 1,000 times before. No protest, no sigh. He signed that garbage slip like he was signing for a pizza delivery, not the gutting of his $3.8 million bonus. Then he folded the paper with 2 clean creases, tucked it into the inside pocket of his worn blazer, and stood up, just like that. No one breathed. Monica smiled like she'd won something. Thank you, Ray, she said, all fake pristine. We appreciate your continued contributions. He nodded once, not even toward her, just at the room, then turned and walked out of HR like a man late for a dentist appointment. That's when I knew something wasn't right, because Ray Collier doesn't just walk away. Ray Collier remembers files, archives, catalogs, and when he's quiet, that's when you should start praying. Hey, if you're still here listening to this, it probably means you're as hooked on stories like these as I am. Only 3% of folks actually hit the subscribe button, so if you enjoy this kind of twisty, true corporate revenge, take a second to like the video and subscribe. It seriously keeps us going and helps the team bring you more crazy stuff like this. All right, back to the silence before the storm. After Ray left, Monica did her little victory shuffle back to her office, heels clicking like she was auditioning for The Devil Wears Target. She had this look on her face, like she'd just cleaned house. Her words during the exec call that followed were even cockier. Legacy cleanup complete. Save the company almost $4 million. Laughter around the table. No one questioned it. Why would they? Ray never raised his voice, never demanded the spotlight. To them, he was just the compliance guy who smelled like printer toner and wore loafers that hadn't seen polish since the Bush administration. But I saw his face when he walked past my desk. Just for a second. Not anger, not sadness. Just that look people get when they've already picked out your casket and they're deciding between lilies or marigolds. He didn't even glance at Monica's glass-walled office. Just walked straight to the elevator, badge clipped, eyes forward. Here's what they didn't know. Ray wasn't always the wallpaper. 5 years ago, before half of these Armani-clad idiots even showed up, Ray held the company's guts in his hands. We were circling the drain after an executive fraud scandal, the kind that kills brands and brings federal subpoenas with little gold seals. It was Ray who stayed late. Ray who kept us from bleeding out by redrafting executive comp structures behind closed doors, while the rest of us were too busy ducking headlines. I know because I sat across from him during half of those late nights. He didn't ask for credit, didn't posture, just typed. Quiet and surgical. And somewhere in that fallout, he brokered something. I never saw the full document, but I remember the whispers. That he had a side letter, signed by the old CEO before he got yeeted out with a golden parachute, guaranteeing Ray's bonus in perpetuity, in exchange for his silence, in exchange for not testifying. People said it was nothing. Others said it was a myth. But the way he walked out of HR that morning, like a man who already knew what that clause would cost them, that was no myth. What's wild is Monica, queen of paper trails, never even checked the old settlement index. I would have bet my car she thought the clause was expired, buried, irrelevant. That Ray's file was just another dusty entry in the compliance archive she couldn't wait to digitize and delete. What she forgot is that Ray built that archive. Wrote half the retention policies herself, still uses to this day. And when she bragged about cleaning house, I swear I heard the HVAC hum slow down like the building itself was holding its breath. That was Wednesday. By Thursday morning, Ray's cubicle was spotless. No trace, not even a coffee ring. Just a single drawer, locked. I watched from the mezzanine as he came in early, no jacket, just gloves and that same faint smirk like he'd already seen how this ended. He opened the drawer, pulled out one black envelope, checked it, and walked out with the same nod. He never said goodbye, never looked back. And that, my friend, is when the countdown started. 5 years back, this place was bleeding from the throat, and no one wanted to admit it. The old CFO, Jack Levon, remember him? Got caught double-dipping bonus clauses and falsifying board signatures. That man was signing million-dollar payouts like he was ordering Postmates. When the story almost leaked to the Journal, it was Ray they called. Not the crisis PR team, not legal. Ray, the compliance guy, the one who'd never said no, never asked for applause, never left before 7:30 p.m., even when the building was dark. They threw him into the fire without a flame suit. I still remember the look on his face when they handed him the shredded expense logs and whispered, "Clean this up or we're all screwed." And somehow, he did. Quietly. Surgically. He didn't bark orders or grandstand. He just started pulling threads, contracts, clauses, timestamps, audit logs, and rewrote the entire executive comp structure over the course of 3 sleepless weekends. But here's the thing that no one besides me seemed to notice. Somewhere in all that mess, he negotiated something for himself. I was in the building that night. It was late, maybe 11 p.m. Ray was meeting with the old CEO, Dennis Grove, just the two of them in the war room. Glass walls, dim lights, folders all over the table like a damn autopsy scene. They weren't yelling. It was worse. They were calm. Quiet voices, nods, one of those old-school pens Dennis liked to use. At one point, I saw Dennis hand over a single-page document. Ray read it, looked up, and said something I couldn't hear, but Dennis nodded. And that was it. Ray walked out without a smile, without even a breath of triumph. But I saw that page go into his briefcase, and I never saw it come out again. People forgot. Time passed. The scandal died down. Jack Levon took a luxury consulting gig in the Caymans. Dennis retired for health reasons, aka pre-indictment exit. The new regime came in full of LinkedIn platitudes and PowerPoint swagger. And Ray? He just melted back into the wallpaper like he'd never been in the room where it happened. Like the man hadn't literally held the threads of this company's survival in his hands. Until now. That document, the one I saw him take that night, that was the side letter. A one-pager, countersigned, time-stamped, legally binding. It promised him full bonus payouts annually, with no subjective performance review required. But here's the kicker. It also included a clause no one else saw coming. A small little blip in footnote form: if said compensation is withheld, the company must notify all executive contract holders under Section 11D, triggering immediate reevaluation of existing control conditions under 17B. In plain English, deny Ray his bonus, and you set off a legal landmine that forces every golden parachute, equity clause, and retention package back to the negotiation table. Basically, pull the wrong Jenga piece and the whole tower starts trembling. And the best part? The clause only existed because Ray wrote it during the cleanup, because he had to restructure those contracts anyway. So he buried a tripwire in the legalese, one that looked like just another governance provision. And Dennis, half desperate and fully cooked, signed it. The company's lawyers at the time never even flagged it. The board didn't ask. No one questioned why the quiet man in compliance suddenly needed a personalized clause. They were too busy saving their own necks. Ray never used it, never mentioned it. Just kept showing up, kept doing his job, letting the suits pretend they were in control. Because he wasn't interested in control. He was interested in leverage. And when Monica Kane scribbled attitude problem in a bonus denial memo and pushed it across that table, she had no idea she'd just tugged the pin out of a grenade buried 5 years ago. She thought she was flexing on the past. But the past? It was about to write her future in bold, irrevocable terms. Monica was in rare form that morning, doing her usual TED Talk voice on the 8 a.m. executive sync. I think we finally turned the corner with legacy costs. She beamed, dragging her vowels like she was headlining an HR summit. Phase 1's complete. We've handled the old guard and saved the company just over $3.8 million in unnecessary bonuses. Clean slate, culture first. Someone on the call clapped. One of the directors chuckled. Finally, like we'd just buried some ghost. And somewhere outside that room, down the quiet west wing of level 4, Ray was standing at his desk, watching, not reacting, just listening. One AirPod in, posture straight as a level. He didn't flinch, didn't blink, just slowly turned, walked to his cabinet, pulled out a key, flat, silver, worn smooth from use, and unlocked the bottom drawer. That drawer hadn't been opened in years. Inside was no clutter, no leftover forms or random tech cables like the rest of us keep in our chaos compartments. Just 3 manila folders, a thick leather-bound ledger, and one black envelope. He ignored the folders, left the ledger untouched. Just picked up the envelope, checked the seal like it was something sacred, and carried it back to his desk like he was holding a will. It didn't look like revenge. It looked like ritual. The air around him changed. I don't mean that poetically. It physically shifted, like every molecule around him suddenly stood still. Even from my cubicle, I could feel it. The silence wasn't heavy. It was sharp, like someone had turned the dial on gravity just for him. He sat down, laid the envelope flat, opened it. Inside was a single page, a one-pager. I caught a glimpse as I passed by to grab coffee. Legal language in fine serif font, tight as a wire. Bottom corner bore 2 signatures. One was his. The other? Dennis Grove. He didn't smirk, didn't sigh, just read through it once like he was confirming something, like a pilot doing a final checklist before takeoff. Then he placed it in a fresh manila folder, labeled it G Contingency, and tucked it into his laptop bag. After that, he returned to answering emails. I swear to God. Monica, meanwhile, spent the rest of the morning parading through Slack like she'd solved employee retention with her bare hands. She even posted a gif of someone cleaning a dusty old filing cabinet with the caption, "How legacy cleanup feels." It got 12 likes, mostly from interns. What none of them realized, what they never bothered to check, was that in trimming their so-called old guard, they hadn't removed a cost center. They'd triggered a fuse, and that document Ray pulled, it wasn't some sentimental copy. It wasn't a souvenir. It was the original, signed in ink, time-stamped, notarized, the side letter. And in its footnotes, tiny, almost invisible to the casual eye, was the clause that had survived 5 years of leadership turnover, 5 audits, and 6 rounds of contract revision. Nobody had bothered to read it, nobody except the man who wrote it. And now, he was just waiting for them to prove they hadn't. Zach Owens had been with the company for about 9 months. New general counsel, straight from a fintech darling that imploded after burning through Series D like it was kerosene. He came in wearing tailored vests and saying things like, "Risk is just narrative management." The kind of guy who thought legal muscle was measured by how fast you could redline a contract on an iPad while ordering a $16 smoothie. That Thursday morning, Zach was sifting through backlog when Ray's email popped up. No subject line, just one sentence in the body. "Please review by Friday EOD," attached. A PDF titled Addendum Exec Comp Haas Side Letter, R. Collier, Final Signed. Zach clicked it, exhaled. Another dinosaur crying over his bonus, he thought. He'd seen it before. Legacy guys holding on to expired paperwork like it was the Magna Carta. He skimmed the first paragraph, half scrolling while sipping something green and allegedly citrus-based. Then his eyes stopped. Line 7. Something about executive continuity incentives. He scrolled back. Slower this time. Section 11D. In the event that compensation designated under this agreement is withheld without mutual amendment, the company shall be considered in breach of continuity terms governing executive-level contract stability. Zach's brow twitched. He opened a new window, started cross-referencing internal contract models. One tab led to another, then another. Footnote 4 was buried under a dense block of legal language, exactly where no one under 40 ever reads. Breach as defined in this document activates reevaluation of applicable executive control thresholds under Section 17B, as required by the Audit Subcommittee in accordance with Charter compliance. He froze. That clause was real. Real. Section 17B wasn't about Ray's bonus, it was about the entire executive team, their golden parachutes, their retention equity, their control. Under the charter Ray himself helped revise during the fraud cleanup years ago, if a continuity breach occurred, if even one key compensatory clause went unenforced without cause, it triggered a review, not just of the breached contract, but of all executive contracts tethered to the same governance cycle. Translation: cut Ray's bonus, and the company had to notify every exec with a continuity clause that their contracts were under audit. It would open up renegotiation windows, possibly nullify certain performance payouts. Worse, In that review window, decision power temporarily shifted from the CEO's office to the audit subcommittee, three crusty board members who hadn't trusted a single C-suite hire since 2018. Zach's smoothie sat untouched now. He reread the email, that one line. Please review by Friday EOD. It wasn't a threat, not even a request. It was a timer. Zach immediately forwarded the file to two people, the Chief of Staff and Monica Kane, with the subject line, Need to discuss potential clause interaction, BBU exec comp models. Then he picked up the phone. The CEO, Travis Merrick, answered after 2 rings. What's up, Zach? Zach's voice was tight. Ray Collier sent over a document, side letter, dated 5 years ago. It's not standard. A pause. Travis chuckled. Is this about the bonus thing? I thought Monica handled that. She did, but we might have an issue if this letter is enforceable. Define issue. Zach inhaled through his teeth. Define cascading breach condition tied to control clauses on 5 executive contracts, including yours. Silence. And that's when the tension began to spread, like the first crack across a windshield. Ray didn't walk into any meetings that day. He didn't need to. He'd already fired the first and only shot. And now the C-suite was scrambling to find out how deep the wound would go. Friday morning started with a mandatory 8:30 legal call labeled Risk Contingency, Internal Only. Zach marked it private, no agenda attached. The invite went out to the CEO, COO, Monica, the head of corporate strategy and outside counsel on standby. Ray wasn't on the list. Of course not. That would have implied this was about him, and no one was ready to admit that yet. Travis Merrick, the CEO, joined 2 minutes late from his car, AirPods in, eating something loud. So, he muttered, chewing, this is about the dinosaur and his imaginary contract? Zach didn't laugh. Not imaginary, he said flatly. Enforceable. If we don't pay him by 5 p.m., we might trigger 5 executive continuity clauses. Maybe more. Travis scoffed. So pay the guy or don't. What's the risk? He files a claim, let him. Zach's tone didn't change. No, that's not the risk. The risk is in the trigger. If that clause activates, our hands are tied on retention language across senior roles, including yours. The chewing stopped. That's when outside counsel, Amanda Jakes, finally spoke. She'd been quiet until then, listening, parsing. I've read the letter, she said. It's cleverly written, smart phrasing, ironclad even. Whoever drafted it buried the trigger inside a standard bonus enforcement clause, which itself looks harmless. But footnote 4 effectively creates a backdoor breach flag. Travis blinked. English, please. Amanda sighed. If you breach the letter, even accidentally, it doesn't just breach his deal. It activates audit rights and temporary review status on every contract tethered to continuity governance. 5 executives meet that criteria, which means 5 possible renegotiations. What kind of renegotiations? Terminations, compensation freezes, forced board oversight on strategic decisions. Basically, you light 1 fuse and 5 bombs go off. Monica unmuted. Okay, but can't we just settle with him now, quietly? No, Zach cut in. Because if we offered to renegotiate the bonus after issuing a formal denial, it can be interpreted as acknowledgement of breach. That's already baked into his document. Amanda added, which means the trigger already happened the second he received the denial memo. Everyone went silent. It hit them like a domino line reaching the last tile. They hadn't just denied a bonus, they'd activated a systemic kill switch hidden in a file nobody reviewed because they thought he was just some overpaid compliance barnacle. And the worst part? Ray hadn't lifted a finger since. He wasn't CCing anyone, wasn't threatening litigation, wasn't forwarding anything to the board. No calls, no Slack messages, no HR escalations. Just silence. Because he didn't need to shout. He'd already written the ending. Travis finally spoke again, this time quieter. So, what happens next? Amanda said. If we don't wire him the full amount by 5 p.m., the company is in technical breach. Once that happens, every executive contract linked to Section 17B has to be flagged for board-level review. And since the audit subcommittee has the authority to oversee breach events, you're temporarily stripped of unilateral authority on anything involving personnel or comp. Monica leaned in, her voice tight now. So we lose decision power until they finish a review? Zach nodded. Which could take weeks, Amanda, or months, and the press risk, if this gets out, is non-trivial. Travis whispered, Jesus. And somewhere down on level 4, Ray Collier was sipping black coffee from a thermos older than Monica's career and finishing his daily walk around the building. Not pacing, not worried, just walking like it was any other day. Because in his mind, the war had already been won. He wasn't invisible anymore, not because he demanded to be seen, but because they suddenly couldn't afford to look away. At 8:06 a.m. on Thursday, Ray received a short, neat email from Zach Owens. Subject: Revised Incentive Proposal. Body: Ray. In light of ongoing conversations, would you consider a revised incentive structure that better reflects your evolving role and continued value to the firm? I'd welcome a discussion. Please let me know what time works for you today or tomorrow. Zach. It was polite. Crisp, almost deferential. You could feel the squirm under the surface, like a man trying to unspill a glass with words. Ray read it once, marked it as read, and never replied. He didn't need a meeting. He didn't want a renegotiation. He just wanted clarity, and the clause already gave him that. Instead of responding, he arrived precisely 1 hour earlier than usual, parked in his normal spot, and walked into the building with a small cardboard box under one arm. No drama, no announcement, just him. Same loafers, same coat, same thermos with the faded "Compliance is sexy" sticker peeling off the side. He walked to his desk, sat down, and began opening drawers one by one. Quiet as snowfall. No one noticed at first. Not really. You had to be paying attention to clock the difference. He wasn't taking company files or documents, just the personal stuff. A family photo from a 2003 trip to Mount Rainier, a Zippo lighter with the initials WJSI engraved on the bottom. 2 books, one on the Enron collapse, the other on jazz theory. A pen with the ink half gone. Everything else stayed. His monitors stayed on, his badge still worked. He was still listed in the system as Senior Strategist, Governance and Compliance. But if you watched closely, and I did, you could tell something was off. The movement was too deliberate, too final. He wasn't threatening to leave. He'd already decided. By 10:15, his cube was bare, not wiped, just neutral, like no one had ever been there. He even realigned the keyboard and mouse like he was leaving it for the next tenant. The box stayed tucked under his desk, unopened since his arrival, just waiting for the final piece. The moment. Because that's what this was now. A countdown. He'd started it the second he walked out of Monica's office. HR had assumed they'd taken something from him. They hadn't realized he'd simply started a timer. The clause gave them until Friday, 5:30 p.m. Eastern, to make him whole. Not half, not restructured, not performance adjusted. Whole. Or the contract breach would trigger automatically. No litigation needed, no action required. Ray didn't need to demand anything. The document was already louder than any tantrum. Meanwhile, up on the executive floor, I could feel the pressure building like a sealed room with no vents. Word had started to circulate that something was up with Collier. People were whispering. A finance VP asked me if I knew whether Ray had legal leverage on something. I just shrugged. The real panic hadn't hit yet, but the fuse? It was now audible. Every tick of the clock wasn't just a second lost, it was a step closer to structural disruption. If the payment wasn't made by EOD Friday, the company would officially be in breach and the clause would trigger oversight from the board's audit subcommittee. What most people didn't grasp, couldn't, really, was that Ray built those clauses. He designed them during the cleanup. Buried the language under innocuous headers, added footnotes where eyes glaze over. He didn't just understand the architecture of the system. He was the architecture. And now that system was quietly aligning against the very people who thought he'd be too old, too slow, too compliant to use it. At 4:17 p.m., he stepped out for his usual walk, box in hand, and passed Monica in the hallway. She gave him a tight little nod, the kind that says, "See, we're all adults here." He nodded back once. But her smile faltered, because something in his expression didn't match the gesture. It wasn't sadness or anger. It was finality. The kind that makes your stomach drop when you realize someone else has already read the last page, and it doesn't end well for you. The clock wasn't just ticking anymore, it was humming. By Friday morning, the building felt different. Tense, like the air had a weight to it nobody could place, but everyone was carrying. The executive floor, usually buzzing with sales metrics and passive-aggressive jokes about quarterly margins, had turned deathly quiet. Doors stayed closed. Calendars went private. Even Monica was unusually subdued. Her chirpy good mornings traded in for tight-lipped nods as she clicked past the open office pit, with eyes glued to her phone. At 10:03 a.m., the first domino fell. The board's audit chair, Margaret Ellison, 74, sharp as broken glass, called an emergency subcommittee session, not a call, a meeting, in person, mandatory. 4 names on the invite: CEO Travis Merrick, General Counsel Zach Owens, HR Director Monica Kane, and, this one raised eyebrows, outside legal counsel Amanda Jakes. The location: Boardroom A, glass-walled, corner of the building, soundproofed but very, very visible. I wasn't in the room, but I saw the faces as they filed in. Zach was pale. Monica looked like she'd aged 10 years since Wednesday. And Travis? That smug sheen he always wore like cologne had cracked. He looked off, like a man who'd heard thunder but hadn't seen lightning yet. Rumors started immediately. Is this about Collier? Something legal? Wait, doesn't Ray know our comp structure? I thought he was retiring. Is he suing? What's this about the audit board taking power? That last one was the whisper that started the real panic, because buried deep in the original contract charter, under Section 17B, was a clause that almost no one alive had touched in years, except Ray. It stated, in the event of a confirmed continuity breach impacting executive contract stability, temporary veto power over personnel and compensation decisions shall transfer to the Standing Audit Subcommittee until independent review is concluded. In simpler terms, screw with Ray's guaranteed payout, and the board takes the CEO's steering wheel away. Temporarily, sure, but long enough to rip open parachute clauses, equity releases, and retention perks that had been sleeping peacefully under auto-renew. And suddenly, every C-suite exec with a bespoke package and a backdated stock trigger started asking the same question. What happens if Ray's clause activates? The answer? You might not be able to exit cleanly. That equity grant from 2 years ago? Frozen. The relocation bonus with the sunset clause? Renegotiated. The non-compete payout buried in your golden handshake? Subject to new approval. Travis tried to spin it during the meeting. He reportedly said, "This is just legacy noise. One guy's contract isn't going to topple the ship." But Amanda didn't blink. That one guy's contract was reviewed by Dennis Grove personally, and the clause was co-authored by Ray himself. In fact, a lot of your executive comp language was post-Levan scandal when the firm rewrote the entire governance structure. Monica's voice, shaky. Wait, are you saying Ray designed the trigger? Amanda, yes. He built the architecture. You've been living inside it. Silence. That's when Margaret spoke. Not loudly, just clearly. If we are in breach by 5 p.m. today, she said, the subcommittee assumes oversight, and any perception of internal instability during Q4 will reflect poorly on the board's confidence in this administration. Translation. You let this fire burn, we start asking how you let it get this far. Back on level 4, Ray sat in the cafe nook near the printer, reading. Quiet power. The hidden strengths of introverts, I think it was. No laptop, no badge visible. Just him and a lukewarm cup of black coffee. A junior analyst nervously passed by, paused, then blurted, Mr. Collier, are you okay? Ray looked up, blinked once, smiled faintly. I'm fine, thank you. He returned to his book. But the analyst walked away like he'd just made eye contact with the bomb squad leader, right before the detonation, because by then, the spiral had begun. The CEO couldn't get through to the chairman. Monica's assistant burst into tears after a hushed call with legal. 2 senior execs started quietly reviewing their contracts, one of them printing it out like it might protect him if the lights went out, and all the while, Ray said nothing. No reply, no memo. No escalation, because he didn't need to. He had already written the clause. He was the clause. And now the house he built, quietly, invisibly, with footnotes no one ever read, was leaning, not collapsing, just creaking loud enough for everyone to hear it. and there were still 6 hours left on the clock. 3:17 p.m. Friday. The whole building was holding its breath. Emails slowed to a trickle. Slack statuses quietly flipped to offline even though everyone was still at their desks. It was the kind of silence that doesn't come from peace, it comes from dread. The kind where even the elevator chimes sound like warnings. Ray wasn't in the office. He was in his car. Level 2 of the staff parking garage, same spot he always parked in. Third row, end space, right next to the emergency exit. Engine off. Windows cracked just enough to let the cool air drift in. The radio was on, low volume, playing something jazzy and sad, like a soundtrack to a movie that knew how it ended from the start. He sat with his phone face down on the passenger seat, badge clipped to the dashboard. Company laptop logged out, screen black. No texts sent, no calls made. He was just waiting. Not for the money, for the choice. Back upstairs, Zach was spiraling. His laptop screen had 3 tabs open. The side letter PDF, the breach clause in the executive handbook, and the audit subcommittee's escalation protocol. At 3:19 p.m., he bolted out of legal and physically sprinted, down the hallway toward the CEO's office, tie half loose, hair damp from panic. Monica saw him fly past and said something he didn't hear, or didn't care to. He slammed into Travis Merrick's office door without knocking. Travis was pacing, talking on a Bluetooth headset, voice sharp and clipped. "We're not in breach yet. We have until close of..." Zach cut in. "If we don't wire it now, we trigger full board oversight." Travis froze. Zach held up a printout. "They've already drafted the internal memo. The audit chair has it ready. Margaret will activate the clause at 5:01 if there's no wire confirmation. That means you lose authority over comp decisions until they finish the review, and the subcommittee has already started pulling parachute language from 5 contracts." Travis stared at him like a man realizing the fire he started was actually a fuse, one that had already reached the powder. Zach lowered his voice. "You let this ride another 2 hours, they'll call an emergency vote. We'll lose executive continuity, and it'll hit the Q4 call. The street will smell blood." Travis paled. The hand holding the headset dropped. "Send it," he whispered. Zach nodded and was gone before the sentence finished. At 3:32 p.m., the wire room confirmed transfer initiated. Full payout. Bonus plus interest. No conditions, no clawback clauses, no restructuring, just paid. Back in the parking garage, Ray's phone buzzed once. He didn't reach for it right away. Let it vibrate. Let it settle. Then he leaned over, picked it up, read the notification, incoming wire. Amount, $31,124,000. No emoji, no fireworks, just numbers and silence. He closed the app, set the phone down. Outside, someone's car alarm chirped. A maintenance cart rolled by, wheels squeaking against the concrete. He took one last sip from his thermos, capped it, and exhaled. No fist pump, no victory lap, because Ray never wanted to win. He wanted to finish. Upstairs, no one cheered. There was no official announcement. Just a quiet email from the CFO's office saying all legacy obligations have been resolved, sent to no one in particular. Monica didn't reply. Travis went home early. Legal went radio silent. And Ray? He just waited 5 more minutes. Then turned the key. The engine hummed. The radio played something soft, maybe Coltrane. He backed out slow, merged with the exit lane, and vanished into daylight like smoke after a slow burn, because the fire was out. But the damage? Permanent. Monday, 7:52 a.m. The building felt like a church the morning after a scandal. No one made eye contact. The front desk guard nodded without looking up. The elevators took just a second longer to arrive, like even the system was hesitating to move anyone too fast. Ray parked in the same spot, walked in with the same rhythm, no box this time, no laptop bag. Just a man returning to the scene of a resolved equation. Clean. Quiet. His phone buzzed once as he stepped onto the 4th floor. Unknown number. He answered without flinching. "Hi, Ray," Monica said, all corporate treacle. "The CEO would like to see you in his office this morning, if you're available." There was a pause. The soft kind. The one where power stops asking and starts pleading. Ray's reply was calm, measured. "I've transitioned all files. Let me know if the audit committee needs anything from me directly." Click. He didn't wait for a response, because there wasn't one. Monica didn't call back. No one did. Ray walked to his desk, not his cube. Desk. A new one, reassigned quietly over the weekend without announcement. Same floor, different quadrant, nameplate freshly mounted, but it didn't say compliance strategist. It said external advisor, governance oversight. The language was surgical. External meant they couldn't touch him anymore. Advisor meant they still had to listen. And governance oversight? That was the sharpest blade of all. It meant he now stood above the very system that once tried to erase him. He opened his laptop, logged into his new profile. Clean system, new permissions, nothing missing, nothing denied. Across the floor, Monica's team stood huddled near the kitchen, fake laughing over protein bars and performance dashboards. But even the interns knew something had changed. You could feel it in the way people looked at Ray now, not like wallpaper, like radiation. Travis passed him in the hallway around 10:40, didn't say a word, eyes down, steps too quick. The once smug CEO now looked like a man carefully navigating landmines he didn't know were still active. Ray nodded once as he passed. Travis didn't return it. By noon, someone from facilities quietly removed the old employee coffee sign-in sheet outside the break room, the one Monica had proudly installed 2 months ago with engagement metrics and rainbow-colored dry erase pens. In its place, a new laminated sign. Reminder, compliance is not optional. Oversight audits begin this quarter. No signature. But the font? Same one Ray used on every single policy document for the past 11 years. That afternoon, I walked by his new desk just once. He was reading again. Another book. This one on constitutional law. Highlighter uncapped, glasses halfway down his nose. Looked like he'd been there his whole life. I stood there a second too long. He glanced up, smiled, not wide, just enough. "Still quiet out there?" he asked, voice like gravel. I nodded. He closed the book, tapping the cover twice before setting it down. Good. Means they're learning. And that was it. He never raised his voice, never threw a fit, never sent a threatening email or slammed a door. But they paid. All of them. Legally. Quietly. Irrevocably. And now, they'd be checking footnotes. Forever.